This is part of the University of Amsterdam today. However, this was actually built as the headquarters to the so-called Dutch East India Trading Company, known by the acronym the VOC. As you see above the window here, built here in 1606. The VOC, folks, was the world's first ever corporation, and it's what made Amsterdam incredibly successful and wealthy and powerful, the most powerful city in the world for about 200 years. What was happening already in the 1500s? Portuguese merchants are finding trade routes out to the Asias, and they're picking up goods and spices and finding routes back here to Europe. Only you sent one guy out, and you sort of hope that he came back a few months later. But it might get pirated, or it may suffer from mutiny, or it may just sink in a storm, and you lose all your wealth. So the Dutch, always having been clever at making and keeping money, were like, well, why send one guy out there? Why don't we send a group of guys together, or a group of merchants, sail them out together, divide up the goods onto all the ships, and bring them back here. Well, what does that mean? No piracy, no mutiny. And if you lose a few ships in a storm, you'll still get 80 or 90% of your goods back here to sell for a tremendous profit. So this was an incredibly successful idea that they had. Just to give you an idea of how successful, in the 200 years that the VOC operated, the Dutch sailed 4,600 ships out of Amsterdam, 4600. The entire rest of Europe combined sailed 2,500 ships. And the English had the next most powerful trading company. They sailed about 1,200 ships, which is already impressive enough. So that's how functional the Dutch were. Now, you didn't have to be super wealthy to take advantage of this, because they bought and sold stock in the VOC as well. The world's first ever stock exchange exists here in Amsterdam. Other common stock items at that time period, tulip industry. Maybe you heard that tulip's pretty popular here. Yeah, tulip bulbs were being bought and sold for up to 20,000 guilders. And overnight, the tulip market crashed, and that same tulip bulb was worth just 1 guilder. So if you'd invested in tulip bulbs, you lost all your money. But because of this, a lot of people gained a lot of wealth here. Now, the Dutch also started a WIC, a West India Trading Company, which actually traded goods to and from the New World. It was a bit less successful because there was a lot of competition, but there was something interesting that happened in the New World. We own a piece of land called New Amsterdam. The English own a piece of land in South America called Suriname. And they trade ownership of this land back and forth during 3 wars that were fought in the New World. And then they came to a peace agreement and said, we're going to keep the land we have, you keep the land you have. So we get Suriname, and the English get New Amsterdam. No problem. The Dutch think that they're getting an awesome deal, because they think Suriname in South America, fantastic spot for New World goods like tobacco or sugarcane. So they're actually thinking they're getting a better bargain. And there's an old Dutch expression: if you're getting the better end of a deal, you're getting an egg for an apple. So Suriname's the egg, New Amsterdam thus the apple. What's New Amsterdam today?
New York City.
New York City. That's one pretty big apple. Just saying. Did you guys know that New York was a Dutch colony? Yeah, it was actually for about 30 years a Dutch colony. They bought it in 1626 from the Manhattanite Indians. And a lot of people don't know, or they know briefly that it was a Dutch colony, didn't really realize how set up it was. But one fact that sort of permeates history, that Manhattan was purchased for the equivalent of 60 guilders, or $26. Now, I stress the word equivalent, because in the New World, when you were buying and selling things, you weren't selling it with money, because it wasn't an important commodity in the New World. What are important commodities? Beaver pelts and knives and bows and arrows, right? Because if a bear's chasing you, you don't throw a guilder at it. No, you need a weapon. So we've lost the deed to the sale of Manhattan. It burned in a fire here in the 1700s. But we have a deed to the sale of parts of Long Island around the same time, a couple of years later, for the equivalent of 50 guilders. And in that deed, it specifies what 50 guilders are: 2 beaver pelts and a knife. So Manhattan could have been purchased for a few beaver pelts. Crazy. Crazy. Eventually, towards the end of the 1700s, the VOC becomes corrupt. It's selling false stock. On January the 1st, 1800, it's declared bankrupt, and Amsterdam's reign supreme is over. Now, author and historian Geert Mak, a guy who writes a lot about Amsterdam and its history, he said that these 200 years, this was the best time to be an Amsterdammer. There was so much money, so much success happening here. People flocked here like they flock to New York today, looking at it as a sort of cultural and financial mecca in the world, and that the kind of success that we saw here in Amsterdam during the Golden Ages, we will likely never, ever see again. Sorry, folks. Looks like you missed the party by a couple hundred years. Guess you have to go sit in a coffee shop later on and discuss how sad you are. Yeah? Alrighty, I can always get this look in the tour group about this time. We are working our way towards a break. I have a small stop in between, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna head out the door, we're gonna go left up the street.